Hey guys, it's Michael. I want to talk about must finish by date. You know what? I can take this off because it's just me here. In Primavera P6, we often use this must finish by date to put the final deadline on the project. And I'm going to tell you why we shouldn't be doing it. Let's dive in. I got a project right here we're going to look at. Okay, now I teach in my course, P6 Foundations, how to use the must finish by date constraint. I'm going to show you what it does. So it's a project level setting that we can assign to a project that is kind of like the deadline. What's the final project finish date? So let's see what happens when I put one on. Okay, so here we go. We'll match the finish date for this project, July 22nd, 2021. And let's go back and just reschedule the project. Okay, so that's like I have assigned the deadline of July 22nd, 2021 for this project. Now, there's a couple problems with going this way. Let me show you the first one. The first one is, I don't know if you noticed, but I didn't have any negative float, and all of a sudden I have -1 days of negative float. Why is that? This is a common problem with using the must finish by constraint. Let's head back to the project level settings and watch this. If I go to Edit User Preferences and I turn on the Dates tab here, I turn on the 12-hour clock, have a look. Here's our problem right here. The must finish by date automatically defaults to 12 a.m., so 12 midnight. And the project finish date is 4 p.m. So that's where my 1 day of negative float came in. Basically, I'm saying the project must finish at the very first minute of July 22nd, midnight. And the project actually finishes at 4 p.m. that same day. So there's a big hourly long difference there. So of course, what we could do is we could just come in here and adjust this time to 4 p.m. Now, I'm going to do it, I'm going to put 12 back in there, and I will just have to go backwards here and set it that way. Okay, so if we set it that way, then I fixed the problem. Now we don't have that -1 day of float. But that's a problem that if you hadn't watched this video, you might not know about. So that's one of the issues we have with using this. Now there's another issue. It's that when we assign that must finish by date for the project, it changes how float calculations are done on the schedule. The float calculations in the reverse direction, CPM scheduling, now use that date. And that can change float. So let me show you what happens here. Let's look at this activity, foundation. It's a critical activity. It's on my critical path. Now, if I increase it, the duration of this activity, that's just a way of pretending that this activity went long. So let's say I increase it by 3 days and I reschedule my project. You can see that it adds -3 days of total float. I now have -3 days of total float on the schedule. That's not what's supposed to happen when I increase a duration of an activity. And the same thing happens if I decrease it. Remember it was 15 days. What if I put it all the way down to 7 days? Now I have 8 days of positive float on my critical path. Is that accurate? Not exactly. So let me show you what this should look like. Let's put this back to 15. Because our critical path should always have 0 days of float before I have actuals. So let's go and I'll show you how we should be doing this. Let's just remove that must finish by constraint. And let's go down to our final check. This is the last activity in the project. This is our deadline. Let's put our deadline here using a finish on or before constraint of July 22nd, 2021. Okay, let's reschedule using that. And watch now what happens if I increase the duration like I did before. So I increase from 15 to 18. Okay, yeah, I have 3 days of negative float because I am 3 days late. But if I reduce that down to the 7 days, notice that my critical path doesn't end up with 8 days of positive float. It still stays at 0. There's one other problem with using that must finish by constraint. It's hard to notice it. It's hard to see that it was turned on, that a date was put in there. A lot of us are sending schedules back and forth to each other. If we're not aware that we should be checking that, we might not know what's happening to these float calculations. Also, in my schedule log, when I run the schedule log, there is nothing in here that indicates the must finish by date is set either. We do have a section down here, activities with unsatisfied constraints, so we can see which activities have constraints. We can find that out in this log, but we can't see anything about the must finish by date, and that's a problem. So I highly recommend you avoid using the must finish by date constraint that you assign to the entire project, and rather find your final milestone, your final activity in the project, and apply a finish on or before constraint on that activity. Make sure you turn on the time so that you can validate that you've set it to the end of the day, because that will give you that -1 day of total float issue. There you have it. So my recommendations around must finish by and total float calculations for you expert schedulers out there. I hope you got something out of this video. I'll see you in another Ask Plan Academy. I'm Michael. Happy planning.